Thank you for tuning in to Doubling Down with Terry Searcy. Today's topic is why do blacks hate Trump? You know, to help me with this subject today and this topic, Mr. Jimmy Rogers is here with us today. He's a relationship expert, author, founder of R&R Consulting Group, and a husband and a father and a community activist here in Douglas County. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for being here with me today to discuss this controversial subject.
Thank you very, very much. I don't know why it's controversial, because I think Trump has made that very easy.
Well, you know, we're gonna be here to try to get that down.
Okay.
And that's the topic today. So, asking you that topic, that question, why do blacks hate Trump?
Well, let's see. Where could I begin? Well, honestly, you know, with all jokes aside, first of all, I think Trump has made it really easy for blacks and other people of color to dislike him. There have been millions of opportunities for him to speak out against, you know, the injustices that have happened to not only black people but other people of color. For instance, the whole ISIS thing with him, you know, separating the Hispanic kids from their parents, leaving them in these camps for weeks and months at a time, and not speaking against the racist stuff that has happened in Carolina, the marches that were going on there. As a matter of fact, he said there were good people on both sides. You know, not speaking against the few police officers who are unjustly killing unarmed men. It's just a plethora of things that Trump has done and said that makes it easy, not only for black people, but for a whole bunch of other people to dislike him. Yeah. And so that's why, in my opinion, blacks, as you say, hate Trump. Trump has not helped his cause in making people really want to appreciate him, adore him.
Well, one of the things, now, I'm not a Trump supporter or I'm not for or against Trump.
Gotcha.
But today I want that question. I want the people to hear and to start, you know, to start thinking about what the Trump presidency meant to him and just how it affected us. But I'll push back on that a little bit if I had to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
If I had to play devil's advocate, Trump with that situation, especially in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. In Charlottesville, when he said there's good people on both sides, if you kind of look at that interview a little bit later and going a little bit longer, he actually condemned the white supremacists in that interview. He actually said they are terrible, they're awful, they're just terrible people. So one of the things that I was wondering was, why do we listen at 1 minute clips and then we think we just kind of have someone figured out, when if you listen to the whole interview, he did that. And then on top of that, one of the things, another thing is with the law enforcement aspect of it. With me being a prior law enforcement person, I actually kind of appreciated the support that he does give for law enforcement.
Okay.
So now, I am not taking up for the George Floyd situation or anything. That there are bad apples in every bunch.
Gotcha.
And as a former law enforcement officer, I would say, yeah, they need to be held accountable.
Right.
And I think that falls on us as law enforcement officers not calling out the bad ones.
Right.
So I would say, what do we do about those things when we're a world that's caught up in 1 minute sound bites and we don't hear the whole speech, but yet we take off running with it?
Well, of course, I'm glad you asked that question, because that is very, very important. No matter what side of the coin you're falling on, whether you are a Trump supporter or where you are anti-Trump, all of us sometimes fall victim to sound bites. Yeah. All of us fall victim to what I like to call talking points. Very few of us are really researching and digging to get to the bottom and to the totality of the truth. And however, when we talk about Trump, though, I mean, we have watched a lot of his interviews.
Yeah.
We have read all of his tweets.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, he just doesn't make it easy to like him. I mean, we can't argue the things that he says on national TV. That's not a soundbite. That's a whole talking point. We just watched him give a whole speech that sound like something's not right upstairs. I mean, and he says some things that are very inflammatory. Yeah. He says some things that definitely is racist. You know, he says some things that nobody within that has community or literally the best interest of people at heart would say. You know, and I'm sorry. I mean, those are the things that he has done to himself. And it's hard to even see how he's done anything good when we see that more. Anytime that camera comes on, you are gritting your teeth because you don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. And that's a fact.
Yeah. Now, one of the two of the things to that is whenever he speaks, whatever show he's on, it's one of the highest rated shows.
Exactly.
So that goes to my point of psychologically, how do African Americans in my generation that grew up with Trump, how do African Americans that, as I say to some of my friends, Trump's name has been mentioned in more movies, more songs, rap songs mostly, but more rap songs. That society, you know, me being at the age I am, I won't say my age, but but we actually lifted him up. I mean, we actually really liked him. I mean, we really accepted him wholeheartedly in the black community. So what changed between now and then to where he's become this pariah? Because, and I would say this, we have an issue of loving someone to lie to us. I believe that's society in general. If you're fat, your wife doesn't want to tell you, you be like, baby, how I look in this? But you looking at her like she's gained some weight or something that happened and something different. But you as a husband know not to say that.
Right. But Trump doesn't know not to say it.
But is that a good trait?
Well, here's what I will say. Let me get back to your first point of asking how at one point the black community lifted him up. It really wasn't the black community. It was the rap community that lifted him up.
I'll give you that.
This is the same community that also lifts up being a criminal and a thug, a drug dealer, going to the strip club, I mean, this is the same community of people that talks about that stuff. But in the defense of rap and anybody else who was kind of looking at Trump from his TV show, what was the show he had?
Apprentice.
The Apprentice. We may have been more intrigued with the image. You know, this powerful man, he now has a TV show. His name is on a lot of big buildings in New York. And he, you know, whenever you heard Trump, it was something grand that he was doing, right? Because we were attracted to the image. Most of us want that type of notoriety. We want to have that big imagery. But now we're starting to see, especially after the New York 5 case, and how he went after those black people and how he never apologized for the position he took, even when he found out they were dead wrong and the lady lied. He never changed his stance. To this day, he still says the same thing that he said. He was questioned about that. I mean, he still maintained the same thing. So this is why it's hard for not only just black people, but a lot of Americans and other people around the country, the world, to like Trump, because Trump, he doubles down instead of just submitting to I was wrong. You know, so that's why we're having this I guess this cognitive dissonance dealing with Trump. It's hard for us to say, in spite of all that we see him tweet, in spite of all that we've seen him say, now you want me to find something good about him too? That's hard for people to kind of swallow.
But how do we reconcile? How do we reconcile that? Because no president, as an African American, we know, no president in our history has had our best interests at heart.
I concur.
Now, those things have been said behind closed doors, and those decisions have been made. It goes back to what the old saying is, what I say, watch what I do.
Right.
Don't worry about what I say. Watch what I do.
Gotcha.
So I might act like I don't love you and don't say it, but if I show you I love you, you know I love you.
Right.
So with his policies, you have to admit, even though with some very, very bad things, number one on the agenda that even Barack tried, but his own Democratic Party wouldn't allow him to do it, was prison reform.
Okay.
And to this date, over 10,000 people, African Americans, have been freed upon that policy.
Now, I'm going to have to push back on that one.
Okay.
Obama started the prison reform thing.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I'll use this analogy. Do you remember back in when Jimmy Johnson left the Cowboys? The Cowboys were coming off of.
I'm not a Cowboy fan.
Well, I mean, I'm not a Cowboy fan either. But there were some things that happened with the Cowboys that nobody can forget. They won back-to-back Super Bowls. They had a run that nobody could argue.
I would say they
and that's what Jimmy Johnson, stole, whatever you want to call it. But after Jimmy Johnson left, Barry Switzer came into play, right?
Yeah.
Barry Switzer came into play with the same team. Nobody lost. And then they won another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But after that team broke up after that Super Bowl, we realized Barry Switzer wasn't as good of a coach as we thought. Right? This is what I want to say about Trump. We got to make sure that we're not giving Trump credit for something he didn't actually birth. He may be riding the wave of something that was already put into motion before he became president.
But if he was such a hater of African Americans, he didn't even have to jump on that wave.
Well, it wasn't a jump on. Once you got the job, it's almost like inheriting something.
Well, I mean, Barack couldn't get that pushed through anyhow. Even a Democratic held House and Senate, he couldn't get through. When Barack first came into office, he had a super majority. But my thing is, Van Jones, who's a liberal, super liberal, actually had that program under Barack. Trump reached out to him, asked him to come, and said, hey, I would like to finish that with you. I'll help you get it done.
Okay.
Now, that is an oddity of one of the most liberals working with Donald Trump on prison reform that specifically deals with African American men mostly.
So I would ask this question. I can't argue that he has not taken prison reform on as one of his topics. Yeah. But do you agree with him when he says that he's done more for black people than Jesus?
Oh, well, I don't know if I heard that. I don't know if I heard the Jesus statement. But I think, if I have to push back on that, I think in comparison to any other president besides probably Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves, which he did reluctantly. He didn't want to do it. So let's not pretend like Abraham really wanted to do that. Specifically for black people policy, he's done more than any other president.
Okay.
Besides the Civil Rights Bill. I mean, with specific designated black policies. I mean, to give us from prison reform to HBCUs to opportunity zones. Those were designated. And now, remember, with the opportunity zones, one of the things is most of them are nothing but gentrification.
Right.
They're never specified for certain people of color. These opportunity zones were strictly specified for African Americans to be in.
Okay. Well, man, that's a good question about the opportunity zones, and I think that's one of the things that I like to discuss with people, making sure that that's factual. For instance, he was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Trump that is, and he was talking about $100 billion that had been invested into opportunity zones under the federal program, but can't nobody find that. So it's hard to support or find evidence to support a lot of the stuff that he says. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not quite certain, and because I haven't personally read the bills, or we definitely can prove that we ain't no $100 billion been invested in Jack
Yeah.
concerning black people.
Yeah.
You know, maybe putting them in prison, but I mean, it has not been $100 billion invested in
Yeah.
black improvement. You know, and as you stated earlier, no president has done that.
Yeah.
Even when we talk about the civil rights thing, we realize years later that black people are actually benefiting the least from the civil rights package.
I agree.
So these are things that we have to be mindful of in 2020 and beyond. That just because people have these talking points, did we read the bills ourselves? Do we understand the legalities that they have tied up in the, you know, they say the devil is in the details. Are we reading the entire bill, or are we only hearing what they're pushing to get the bill passed? But there's always stuff on the backside of the bill that most of us don't read. And we realize 10, 15, 20 years later, man, we got screwed again.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe Trump is doing. I believe Trump does have a base of people that he is really serving. And it's not black people. It's not Hispanic people. And it's not people that have any pigmentation.
Yeah. Well, with the opportunity zones, I'll push back a little bit on that. We kind of have examples.
Okay.
Killer Mike just bought up pretty much half of the West Side with that opportunity zone.
Okay.
T.I. bought Bankhead Seafood in that area over there in his old neighborhood with the opportunity zone. So we see people taking advantage of it, but the problem is a lot of the people on the lower end, and I'm going to give you this on opportunity zone, but it's got to be upper class African Americans that are taking advantage of it, or minorities that are taking advantage of it, from Indians to blacks to whatever. Now, we know it's actually working because, I mean, that bill was given to us by an African American, Tim Scott. And then, so we know that is kind of working, but any bill that you get, and I always tell people, any policy that you have, you won't feel that policy for 10 to 12 years down the line when a president puts something in effect.
Right.
Because it takes a government a long time just to shift. You know, and for people to think that when someone puts a pen to paper and strokes something,
It's going to change
it's going to
overnight.
change overnight.
Right.
America's too big of an entity to change that fast. So one of my other things is with opportunity zones, there has been property and tax allocation districts that have been set aside for it. So you can't get this white robber baron to come in and just take it. But one of the other things I'll push back on you is prison reform, but he also did law enforcement reform, where the chokeholds and all of that stuff, what happened with George Floyd, that is a separate bill from prison reform that he got passed. Pretty much what I would consider a very, very not friendly Republican Senate. And to get it, it would have been a no-brainer past the House, but to get it past the Senate, those are things that affect the law enforcement. And within that law enforcement reform bill is also a reporting that now you have. One of the big things that I think that no one paid attention to, now you're going to keep statistics on pullovers and actually arrest color and racial wise. We couldn't do that prior to that bill coming into play. So that's going to give you, a lot of them don't understand why they don't want to do that, is because that helps you in your lawsuit to show that this is a systemic problem. So I think not only did he do the prison reform, but he strengthened the prison reform with the law enforcement reforms that he did.
But you know the one thing that he did not do as it relates to the police stuff? He did not do away with them not being prosecuted for doing stuff that was illegal. In that reform, in that bill where he's writing in, you know, about keeping the statistics and all those things, there's nothing in there as far as discipline is concerned. The police officers are still not going to prison. They're still getting off, you know, for killing unarmed people. They're still not getting punishments that you and I would get if we did the same thing.
Now I'm gonna say this, and I might need to double check. My memory's kind of foggy. But everybody, and this is where I always tell people, you have to understand and know the system in order to be able to do it. So you got to do a little research. Not saying you, but
in general.
And I know this. There's a Supreme Court case in 1972. Greenfield versus the Sacramento Police Department. We all know whenever the Supreme Courts rule on something, that sets what we call precedence. So that case set precedence that it allowed an officer an amount of time to say my life is in danger.
Right.
So which means that it gave them the what? Right for a justifiable killing.
Right.
So what everybody thinks is that what's going to come along is some great DA or some politician is going to write a law that's going to change all of that. That is a Supreme Court decision that has to be taken back and rectified in order to take that cover away from them. And the second thing about it is most law enforcement agencies is like the Fox Guard and the Hen House. With their IA divisions, they're not separate. Their internal affairs, they're not separate. So you're going to have what we call that blue wall.
Right.
They're going to protect each other.
Exactly.
So, but that's a natural instinct. So in order to break that, a president can't break that. Someone has to take that to the Supreme Court to overturn that precedence that was set that gave that policeman the opportunity to kill you within 20 seconds.
So the president can't be the one to initiate that?
He can.
Right. So that's what we're saying. So if you're writing bills allegedly to help make black people or people of color feel that you really are concerned with these particular situations with police officers, you got to go and take it all away and say, okay, now let's change these laws that protect police officers who have done wrong.
I'll give you that.
So we have to take it all the way.
I'll give you that.
And I agree with you. And there's something very, very powerful about that word that you use, precedence. When that is set, that means anybody who's dealt with the identical thing can now use that in court. Right?
Yeah.
We both know, because we're prior law enforcement, that a citizen has the right to protect themselves against an unlawful arrest.
I agree.
Where that's gonna work at? You gonna get shot dead.
That comes down to what I was saying about the internal affairs. Internal affairs prosecuting their own officers, but I know that's one of the things. But for me, and another thing, I would think we would find common ground on this one: the financing for HBCUs.
Yes. Because
under Barack, it was actually cut bare bone to where we lost almost 12 HBCUs throughout the United States. And another thing that he did with the HBCUs used to have to come back every year and ask for money.
Right.
So they had to beg every year to get their funding. He took it and made it 20 years. Okay. So they don't have to come back unless regulatory or budget constraints happen. They got to come back every 10 to 20 years now.
Right.
So it almost felt like if he was so racist, why would he do that to stop people from coming back begging hand and foot every year to say, can I have?
So can I argue this point? We know for a fact that it appears like one of his primary goals was to reverse just about everything Obama put in place. From health care to everything, right? Are we suggesting that because he's now doing the HBCU, he's done something with prison reform, and now he's pro-black? I mean, what president doesn't try to show that he has an agenda for most of the people that he is supposed to be serving? I think he's playing the same role that most politicians play. Okay, I'm going to do these things, but as you stated, we won't really see until 10, 12 years down the road what the real impact of these policies were, because you and I didn't have the ability to look at the bill, and even if we did, would we understand all the legal terms that's in it? You know what I'm saying? So I think I don't want to give people too much praise, just like I don't want to take away too much credit. Well, I can't argue with you about what he's done with the HBCU. Yes, he did do that. I just don't know what all the details are in that bill. But what we both should be able to agree on too is that, I mean, how we can argue all the stuff he said on national TV.
I would say, now you stumped me with that one. One of the things is I'm a very, and this will have to be a personal reflection,
Okay.
instead of a overall reflection. I am of the nature, most of my friends are straight to the point people. And I like people that are straight to the point. I like the people, I like to know where I stand with people. And I guess me being a business owner, I like to be the guy that come in the room and say, hey, what do you want?
Right.
Now, could I say that with tact? Or could I be that guy that comes in the room and says, no pretense, I don't want to talk about the weather.
Right.
What do you want?
Right.
Now, that would make you feel some certain way. Because you had your presentation together. You were just ready. You were ready to just woo me.
Yeah.
But most of the very wealthy people I've ever met, they are some of the rudest people you ever go meet. Because they're bombarded all day long with requests for things. So you get to the point where it gets blunt. What do you want?
Gotcha.
So for me, as a personal aspect, so I can't say for black people in general, but I think that black people, you know, we all got that aunt and uncle that keep it real.
Right, right.
And believe it or not, those are the ones that we really love.
Right.
So,
because there's no hiding from them.
But he's a creation of the reality show generation.
Exactly.
He's a creation of the keeping it real generation, to where unscripted shows, freestyling it.
Well, all his shows were scripted. He just went off script.
He did, right. But he's a product of the reality show.
Right. And we are drawn to that.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, and I know this is probably gonna blow your mind. I agree. That's why I appreciate Trump.
What?
I appreciate Trump's honesty.
What? Did I win?
Yeah,
no, I didn't win.
No, you didn't win. I mean, I do appreciate Trump's honesty because Trump is one of the few people that will really tell you how he feels and you know where he stands.
Yeah.
And now what Trump has also been able to do is successfully uncover the other people who think just like him.
Yeah.
That may have been lying to us in our faces. Yeah. So that from that perspective, I'm not that mad at Trump.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you for letting me know how you feel and who also supporting you.
Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, I think this. Why do we hate Trump is not hard to really conclude. But I also think that there are some things we can learn as well too. Yeah. We can't deny some of the things he have done, but we cannot deny the things he has done that makes it easy to dislike him.
I would agree with that. There's no perfect human being.
I agree.
And everybody's gonna have flaws, and everybody's gonna do certain things that we're not gonna be happy about. And that's something that I think if we created the perfect president, we probably would still hate him anyway. Because we'll like him because he's too good.
Right.
You know, there's no pleasing everybody. So I think that's just one of the things that we'll do. I guess it's time to put the icing on the cake. This is the time where you fact check us. This is the time where you look up the things that we discussed on the show, from HBCUs to opportunity zones to the George Ford prison reform bill and to the prison reform. And also, we want you to really research these things and look them up. But if you liked what you saw today, please like and subscribe. And I hope to see you next time on Doubling Down with Terry and Searcy.
Black Crook tonight.